Perfect, thank you. So welcome everyone to this Walking and Cycling Innovations of 2021. Very odd for us all not to be able to see each other face to face, but really an exciting lineup for today. So very much welcome to everybody. So I'll just introduce our session and myself. So I'm Lucy Marstrand. I'm the Healthy Streets Advisor at Project Centre. And the panel today, in many ways, it needs no introduction because it's such a formidable panel. But we have, first off, Will Norman, the Walking and Cycling Commissioner for London. We'll then hear from Dame Sarah Storey, the Active Travel Commissioner for Sheffield City Region. Then Adam Tranter, the Bicycle Mayor for Coventry. And last, Simon O'Brien, the Cycling and Walking Commissioner for the Liverpool City Region. But I'll let them each introduce themselves. So I'm going to step off. There's about 10 minutes per speaker. And then I'm going to be monitoring the chat. So if anyone's got any questions, if you put them in the chat, and I'll pick out a number of questions that we'll kind of address at the end of this session. So we'll hear from the four speakers first, and then go to questions at the end. So thank you, Will. I'm going to step back now off the screen.
Thanks, Lucy. Morning, everybody. Thanks for inviting me. Mark, can I have I'm going to do my Chris Whitty impression, and can I have the next slide? Brilliant. Thank you. My name's Will Norman. I'm the Mayor of London's Walking and Cycling Commissioner. My job is one of those sort of Ron Seal jobs. It does what it says on the tin. My job is to get more people walking and cycling. Can I have the next slide, please? So for the past 5 years, we have been building a cycling network. We've been looking at walking innovations. I think we've seen the highest increase in levels of cycling on record during that period. If we move on to the next slide, but then clearly, you know, just as we were gearing up for the elections, just as we'd hit all our targets, COVID hit. And if we move on to the next slide, one of the, all sorts of things changed. We moved into very much, oops, we missed the slide there, but never mind. One of the two things that happened during COVID in London was, firstly, there was far less traffic on the roads. And as a consequence of that, one of the things that I enjoyed seeing most out of all of that was actually seeing more people out on the streets, cycling, walking, running in their local neighborhoods, and families out on the streets. The second was from this slide. There was a massive drop in public transport use, where somebody's saying they can't hear anything. Is that unique, or is that everybody? Okay, some people can hear fine. Great, thank you, everybody. There was a massive drop in public transport use, partly due to the lockdowns that existed, but also because of the need for social distancing and fear of hitting COVID. Could I have the next slide, please? So as we came out of lockdown and addressing particularly that fear, the very last thing that London needed at that point was a car-based recovery. Is still the last thing we need, due to the increased congestion. If a fraction of those journeys that were being made by public transport that aren't now being made by public transport switch to cars, we're going to end up like this: congestion and air pollution. The very last thing we need in the middle of a respiratory disease pandemic is a toxic air crisis. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So what we did, we very rapidly rolled out temporary measures, emergency temporary measures across the city. Could I have the next one, please? Part of that was looking at pedestrian spaces. How could we create more space for people to walk along the streets, create more space for social distancing? This is in Brixton, where we expanded the pavement into taking over highway space, expanding the pavement outside a busy transport hub. Could I have the next slide, please? But it was town centres. It was town centres across the city. So this is Broadway Market in Hackney. Is what it usually looks like. If we flip to the next slide, please. This is what it looks like now, with far more people walking, cycling, and you being able to use those shops. Can we have the next slide, please? Anyone familiar with London will know the main roads and how those main roads can be pretty hostile to cycling. This is Park Lane, I think it's 6, 7, 8 lanes of traffic, 40 miles an hour. we click to the next slide, it's now a 20-mile-an-hour zone with a temporary cycle lane through the middle. Oops, I seem to be missing some slides here. And we did that both in terms of upgrading cycle lanes and putting new cycle lanes in. We also rapidly expanded Liverpool low traffic neighbourhoods, filtering residential and quieter streets, reducing the amount of traffic passing through those areas. So using planters, using bollards and cheap measures such as this. Next slide, please. There was a massive growth in school streets. School streets was another rapidly thing that was rolled out across the city. We had a number of school streets being piloted in boroughs before COVID. I think we now have over 320 school streets, which is essentially closing off the roads at drop-off and pick-up time around the schools. Can we have the next slide, please? Oh, we're missing. Oh, so we seem to be missing quite a few slides, but I'll manage this anyway. So over the COVID period, we put in 90 kilometers of new bike lanes, 80 plus low traffic neighborhoods, over 300 school streets, 90 kilometers of 24/7 bus lanes. We did it all very quickly, and by doing that, you know, this presented significant challenges. Both and not everybody liked it. We've had a lot of backlash. We've had a lot of people complaining about that. We've had legal cases, as many of you be aware of. But we learned a lot through that whole period, and quite frankly, we delivered more in 6 months than we had done than the previous mayor had delivered in 8 years. But some of the learnings that came from that was the requirement, you know, the need for consultation and local engagement. During the COVID crisis, we were using government guidance not to do consultation, and I think that had a lot of negative aspects. The other thing we learned, that we could do things cheaper and we could do things faster than we had ever done before. And while we are still in the thick of COVID, you know, we have still got hundreds of thousands of people in hospital. People are continuing to die of this. The vaccine does present us with a way out of this. But I think, you know, could I have the next slide, please? The next slide, yeah, so, oh, these are all jumbled up. Sorry, the next one. This is not the order which they got sent through. So, no, this shows the family cycling. Next slide, please. I don't know what's happened here. No, so yeah, the next slide, please. So anyway, I'm not. Oh yes, so here we go. This is not one of my kids in lockdown and me doing homeschooling, but this is very much, you know, one of the things that we saw coming out of during COVID, and what we've seen this through the whole process is exacerbated the health inequalities that we see in society. We know that there's an inactivity crisis. London still has the most inactive kids in the country. And I think coming out of this, it shows even more the need to do more on this. The next slide, it's not just an issue of physical health. There is also the issue of mental health, and tackling the slides are all over the place. I'm just going to speak from now on, if that's okay. It's not just an issue of physical health that comes from inactivity. There is also the issue of isolation, and the issue of mental health affecting our communities. Many people are being affected by the economic crisis, and there is a even bigger one coming that will affect us all coming forward. And of course, there is the big thing that is looming over us all in terms of climate change. All of this means that we are going to have to learn from what we did during COVID in terms of delivering things faster and cheaper. But there is even more need to continue with our approach to healthy streets. And I'm sort of going to conclude with a couple of sort of key things that I've learned going through this period, through this crisis. I think there are 3 key ingredients for actually delivering this and delivering this fast. First of all, we need political leadership and with political backbone. That doesn't come from nowhere. We need to keep with the polling, the surveys and other things demonstrating that these are things that people want. The second thing is the technical expertise that we need from officers in terms of delivering these schemes and delivering them well. And thirdly, I think probably most importantly, we need those campaigning communities, all the people who have played a role in terms of asking for these things, talking about it, talking to their local councillors. So those three things: political leadership, technical skills, and campaigning communities are absolutely critical. But in terms of my final point, we were in an innovations conference, and I've sat through thousands of conferences over the years, looking at smart cities, hearing about how artificial intelligence and big data and virtual reality, all automated cars, all of these things are going to play a role in the smarter city. I think what I've learned this year is that the biggest innovation and the smartest thing a smart city can do is essentially put down bollards and planters. That's what will change the city. The key thing is where they go and how you engage people in terms of doing that. So to summarize, we've learned a huge amount during COVID. We haven't done everything perfectly. The speed and pace of which we've been delivering is astonishing. But the key thing that we have learned is that we can do things in London differently. And given the challenges that we'll be facing in the future around climate change, our mental health, our physical health, our economic, the economic crisis, we're going to have to continue to do more of this faster, cheaper, and to benefit of everybody. And I think that's the challenge, and that's the exciting thing that is going to come. And I apologise about the slides.
Hi, thank you so much, Will. I hope everyone can hear me. That was brilliant. I'm assuming you're done there, Will, with your talk. Yeah, well done. It's really hard to speak without the presentation as you planned it, so I thoroughly sympathise on that. But that was fascinating, and I particularly like your comment about the kind of need for, that so much of this stuff is actually quite easy and cheap, like low traffic neighbourhoods. We've shown that you can really transform streets with these very minimal interventions. It doesn't have to be heavy highways engineering.
Cheap, but not always easy.
Yeah, cheap, but highly controversial, exactly. Yeah. So thank you, Will. So there's a flurry of questions coming in now, which is brilliant. So I'm taking a handwritten note of some of these questions. So apologies in advance if I don't manage to grab all of the questions in my notes. I'm going to move on now to Dame Sarah Storey. So I hope that your slides are not jumbled up and that things go a bit more smoothly for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. I've gone for the no slide option. So hopefully there won't be any other type of technical hitches, and my daughter's on a break from her homeschooling, so I have the bandwidth to myself. So keep your fingers crossed. Thank you, Will. Like you, in the Sheffield City Region Mayoral Combined Authority, we're in South Yorkshire. So Sheffield is our city, and we have Barnsley, Rotherham and Doncaster as part of our region. And as with most regions, we had a plan prior to COVID hitting. And our plan was to roll out over the forthcoming 20 years up to 2040, a comprehensive network of walking and cycling routes that would enable people to get from where they live to where they'd like to go, whether that was for work, for school or for leisure. So I've been working really closely with the Mayor Dan Jarvis in the Sheffield City region in South Yorkshire to put together his priorities for transport and making a connected transport system. And obviously for us, cycling and walking are an integral part of everyday life. That Sheffield is known as the outdoor city, but we also want to make sure walking and cycling is an integral part of longer journeys where we use the public transport network. And just like Will explained, we've seen across the whole of the UK massive changes in the number of people who are walking, who are taking buses and trains, and more people are jumping in their cars. And certainly since the pandemic has progressed through the autumn and into the winter months, that has certainly been noticeable on most of our roads. But 2020 was our year to just get things done, to start really rolling out what our plan was. And we had it adopted at the Mayoral Combined Authority meeting on the 1st of June. It had initially been planned for the 23rd of March, but I think everyone remembers that day as that very first day that we all went into lockdown 1. But we always knew that we needed to look towards a healthier future with more activity in it, because we've had activity designed out of our life over the past 40 or 50 years or so, as the motor vehicle has become the priority. And you look around the towns and cities and look around street space, and you just see how much has been given over to the vehicle to enable people to do every single journey on four wheels, on a motorised version of transport. And it's just so much more difficult for many people now to get around on foot or on a bike, because there are vehicles parked on pavements, there's narrowings that prevent them from getting through with their children, parents who push buggies and prams. And there's also that challenge of crossing these busier roads. And where we've tried to increase capacity for vehicles, that's made those roads feel even more intimidating and less safe. So people are less likely to want to walk or cycle if it feels intimidating as well. But when the pandemic hit, and we talk about the very few silver linings that occurred, one of the silver linings was that there was a mandate from government to not drive if you didn't absolutely have to. And this was a significant difference in lockdown 1, perhaps, to the lockdown we're experiencing now, because people were told that the emergency services needed to be freed up to do their COVID work. And if they were attending road traffic collisions, then that wouldn't be possible. And when people were told to stop driving, they took to their feet, they took to 2 wheels, 3 wheels, 4 wheels, pedal power to go around on their daily journeys. And it was really interesting to see streets transformed, and everybody was introduced to low traffic neighbourhoods. And the idea that with less vehicles around, people felt safer to get out and about. And that really provided us with an opportunity to bring more people into what we call in South Yorkshire our big tent. And I know Pete Zanzotta is listening, and he's my active travel programme director. And the big tent analogy is the idea that you bring all the people who are interested in making this particular subject matter improve and move scenarios, so that you can talk about it in a positive way. And so we had more people coming and finding out about what was happening. We repurposed what we had going as an interactive map, so people could tell us where they'd like to see further improvements to help them with social distancing, to help them go from A to B on their bike more easily, or to just get across the road more safely as well. And having that additional engagement was really powerful and showed us just what people would like to see. If you ask someone if they'd like to have a healthier life, then the answer is always going to be yes. And we see walking and cycling for short journeys as very much an integral part of that healthier life in the future. But one of the things we also saw, and I think this is something that Will have experienced in London quite significantly, is the semantics and how we talk about things. So we've started to refer to low traffic neighbourhoods as active neighbourhoods, because we know that if people talk about low traffic, they instantly think about it being nobody walking around or nobody moving. And what we want is people moving, and we want to see people moving, but without that vehicle, without that vehicle traffic. So we've started to use the term active neighbourhoods to try and bring away some of that challenge that people seem to find with having to talk about the idea of no traffic. And it's been quite interesting to hear people's viewpoint on that as we've talked to communities about what it is that they'd like to see in their particular local area. But semantics also takes us to the idea of what we refer to when we talk about roads. And everyone seems to assume, in this constant assumption, that roads are for cars. And actually that road space can be divided up more equitably and allow people to move around without the need for a car. And in South Yorkshire, around 1/3 of households don't have access to one. And we know that it shouldn't be a prerequisite of accessing employment to have a car. You should be able to get there without that. So it's really important that we start to be pinning down what we mean when we talk about things. So the lane of traffic, are we talking about an active travel lane, or are we talking about a vehicle traffic lane? And those things can play a huge part in helping us to move on this conversation. And then that also moves forward to what needs to be done for the future. And obviously we need to see a lot more funding and a lot more continuous funding being put into active travel infrastructure. But it also begs the question that when we talk about the amount of money being spent on the roads, why can't we spend some of that money on providing for people who don't have a vehicle? If the roads are for everybody and all sorts of different modes of travel, then that roads budget should be able to be spent on enabling everybody to get around and do their journeys from A to B. So that's a big challenge that we have. But how we view that in the future is potentially quite a powerful opportunity to start addressing some of the other issues around air pollution, and some of the challenges around inactivity. And if we can start to design activity back into people's lives, make it easier to walk and cycle those short journeys, then it'll certainly help to build more resilience into the population. And we know that we also face an obesity crisis, and that when you're in the middle of a global pandemic that seems to have a more worse form of a disease with people who are carrying extra weight and are living with obesity, then that challenge means that we really do need to focus heavily on building activity back into people's lives. So just like Will has said in terms of his 3 priorities, I would add into that the importance of semantics and how we talk about what we mean, and so that we can start to move forwards with a clear definition of what will make a difference to our future, and to building activity back into people's lives, and to making walking and cycling the first choice for everybody's short journeys.
Brilliant, Sarah. Thank you so much. Yeah, I really like your point about the kind of the activities being designed out. It's so true. You know, there's so much space really on our highways, and yet most of it's dedicated to motor traffic. And this need to kind of design back in activity. And also your point about having, you know, we've all had a bit of a taste, haven't we, for what a street with less traffic actually looks like and feels like. And I think from a lot of us, in this generation and the younger generation, in my generation and younger generations, they've never actually seen that before. You know, what does the street look like without so much traffic on? It's something we've just literally designed out of our experience. So yeah, fascinating talk. There's so many questions coming in. I'm really trying to catch up, sort of keep abreast of them. But thank you so much, Sarah. That was fantastic. So I'm going to move on now to Adam. So I'll again, you know, I hope you don't have any issues with your the speaker and slides and stuff.
Yes, hopefully not. Just one second. I'm going to open up my slides, which I think you'll then be able to see from now. There we go. Cool. Thank you for having me, first of all. I'm here to tell you a little bit about my role as bicycle mayor and in fact, what a bicycle mayor is. But first, a little bit about me. I was born and raised in the city of Coventry. My day job is not doing this. My day job is running a communications agency called Fusion Media. Through this, we set up the Bike is Best campaign last year, which you might have seen, and also just this week set up the Cycling Marketing Board, which aims to change the image of cycling and also make sure that local authorities have the courage to make the bold decisions that they need to. And everything I try and do is about trying to adapt the work that I do in communications to the active travel arena, and to be able to drive change in local areas, and specifically the local area that I'm in, which is Coventry. So I'm a volunteer, and I'll explain how bicycle mayors work soon. But Coventry is known as the UK's motor city. It's the UK's equivalent. It's Detroit, effectively, of the UK. And like so many cities, the transport system is unbalanced in favour of the private car. And it's not a city that really has a massively ambitious focus for cycling. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, to try and change that and try and get it on the same radar as London, Sheffield, Liverpool, etc., Manchester, and try and drive this plan. And things are starting to happen. We have 2 high-quality, fully protected bike lanes in the pipeline. One's got stuff in the ground, as you can see on the bottom right, in Camden, and one which is being funded by the West Midlands Combined Authority is the route for Binley, about £5 million worth. So we're starting to make some change. So what is a bicycle mayor? Well, a bicycle mayor takes inspiration from night mayors, which need a better name in English, but they were first appeared in Amsterdam, and they were members of the public appointed by their communities to work with government to fight for the rights of the nighttime economy. And in this case, the organisation I work with, Bikes, which is BYCS, is a social enterprise, and they saw that and thought, that was good, I'll do that for bikes. And they created the Bicycle Mayor Network, and there are over 100 bicycle mayors worldwide now. It's really important to say that they're independent of government. So I'm not a representative of the council, although I engage a lot and have a good relationship with the council, and we're politically neutral. Being a bicycle mayor is a platform, if you like, to support positive change and also hold power to account, which can obviously push that change. I think it's a new and innovative form of local advocacy. It's good to hear Will mentioning, needing the support of local advocates, and I think this is a great way to give those advocates a platform and push for better change in the absence of having, a cycling and walking commissioner in that area. So I've been asked this question: how do we accentuate the positive for 2021 and beyond, and deliver this government's promised walking and cycling revolution? And I've set it up into a series of goals. I think goal number one is that we need to speak the language of most people. And this was at the start of the pandemic. Obviously, when we created LTNs, we had road ahead close or road close signs. And one thing that the advocacy community did brilliantly, in particular Sarah Berry and Lambeth, created an alternate sign, not DFT approved, but who cares, road open. And that really set the tone, as Sarah was saying, for who this is for, and the fact that the roads are for everybody and that they're not closed, they're open. And I think the learning to 2021 has all got to be about the communications and how we sell the benefit.
I think we might have lost a connection there.
Yeah, I think we lost two.
Or is this just me? I don't know. It's really hard to tell.
We've lost Simon as well.
Okay.
Hold on, I've got some house kicked out, which is nice. I will go again if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Just take it. We're doing
Sure.
half the time, so don't worry.
Okay, cool. Did we get the road closed stuff? Did that make it on? Yeah, cool. Oh.
Yeah, we heard a bit about that. Your point about the language and
Got it.
Yeah.
Fine. So we need to sell the benefits, and we need to talk in the language of the general public. And it was thanks to Sarah Berry for producing this sign that really helped us do that. We need to also trust that people know what good looks like and deliver it. And this anecdote that I try and use quite regularly is not courtesy of me. It's actually courtesy of Brian Deegan, who many of you will know. And that's that actually people do know what good looks like. People pay a premium to go to centre parks. 93% of the UK population have heard of centre parks and know what it is, according to YouGov. And centre parks are effectively a low traffic neighbourhood. They have low speed limits. They have access retained for disabled people and essential deliverers. They're safe enough for you to allow your children to walk, scoot or cycle. And actually, they're even 15-minute cities. They have all the amenities that you need within walking distance or short cycle distance. They also know what they're doing. They have places to stop and sit, and they are experts at providing the best environment possible. And we need to take a leaf out of that book as well. And it creates this equitable transport system that for a week of a year, people experience and they actually like it. And that's why our schemes need to, in the future, show this and also talk to the communities and explain the benefits that they're getting. Another one is one of the things that I often say is that when they to other places, no one comes back from Amsterdam and says, "Yeah, I had a really nice time in Amsterdam, but I just wish there were more cars. I just wish it was a bit harder to cross the road." Everybody knows what good looks like in that sense, and therefore I think that we should use these in our communication tools. Change is hard, so I think it's really important that we show what's possible and what good would look like in a low risk way. So every major cycling city in the world, really, if you look at it, started through an open streets program. It started with having, like every Sunday in Amsterdam, they used to close the roads to cars, and they started that. And it's a great way to give people a taste and see if they want to keep it. And it's a halfway house between the temporary measures. But I'm confident that once the majority of the community see the benefits they have on it in a controlled environment, then they'll be in a really informed place to be able to say, yeah, I'd like to keep that. And often data about pollution and induced demand and stuff just doesn't cut through. So it's really important to give people a taste. And obviously great cities like London have done this with Car Free Day and things like that. I also think it's really important to do co-designing and also high quality visuals. You see on the bottom right, we have Paris, which really showed their 15-minute city concept in a way that inspired and appealed to lots of broad audiences. I also think we should treat every scheme like a marketing campaign. And in business, I often talk about delivering the experience economy. Cars are brilliant. Car brands are brilliant at delivering the experience economy. If you've ever pressed like a cup holder and it slowly glides out at you, and then you put your cup in, it could just come out at you and you could just do it and it would serve the same purpose, but they've delivered an experience. And lots of things we do are about experience. When you go to your local car dealership and you sit down and they bring, oh, like a latte, sir, while you're waiting, that's part of the experience economy. And we need to do the same in active travel. But too often what we actually get is this kind of stuff. So on the right-hand side was how one of the local authorities, not Coventry, communicated how they were going to close the main town centre road as part of the COVID measures. And they also installed a small road closed on Station Road. And they didn't explain it, and they just provided this PDF. And as the top left, you can see I'm from one of my local Facebook groups. People just do not understand why you're doing it. And actually everybody vetoed pretty much the measures on the main high street, which meant that instead of a road closed, we ended with what I believe to be the world's first pedestrian system pavement, which is a really sad state of affairs. And I think it all boils down to communications. So I did a little, this is another example actually. Obviously Reigate was a scheme that was well intentioned, but only lasts 3 or 4 days. And I'm not an expert in what's happening in Reigate, but it did occur to me when I saw the pictures that having all these cycle lanes were put, cycle parking Sheffield stands were put in with the best of intentions. The fact that they were sat there largely empty for most of the day, because we know that things don't change overnight, gave people a PR problem. It said, like, look, they've got all this space and they're not even using it. And just subtle tweaks to the design could have potentially prevented that from happening. I did a little experiment in my local area. I took the Station Road that was closed, and actually people, vans were parking on the, well, drivers of vans were parking on the pavement to do their deliveries. So the council installed bollards, as you can see on the right-hand side. And I created just a basic Photoshop of a modal filter with some chairs, and said, oh, the local, the local pub could serve food outside and we could sit down, etc. And instead of having people ranting about it, as you can see from the comments and shares, we had loads of people saying, this is great. And actually the top right-hand side started to happen. We had live music in our small road closure, which again, people could see the benefits and not just what you were taking away from them. I took it one step further on the bottom right. I installed in the middle of the night an illegal parklet. This is a parklet that has no permission. I'm sorry, council. And it's been there since the 23rd of September, which is Car Free Day. It's still there now, and this is in an area near to me where everybody complains about change, and we are very happy with our status quo. I delivered this by using temporary materials and give people a place to sit during lockdown, and it's been there for getting on 4 months now, and not a single person has complained. No one has got a problem. People are using it every day. It's because we're giving something, not taking it away. We've taken the parking space away, but I've given them something better, and therefore people understand what the benefit is to them. As Will said, I think we want to work with advocates to build schemes from the community up. So I'd encourage everybody who's listening from local authorities to reach out to your local groups, consider getting a bicycle mayor. I'm here in my role to support the council when they are bold, provide them with political air cover, so they can make the bold decisions. I'll support them in the media, and I guarantee there'll be people in your city that will do the same. I have a mutual understanding with the city council that I'll hold politicians to account when it doesn't go well. But the level of ambition and quality, therefore, has increased, and I can therefore focus my communication on selling the benefits rather than just pointing out what's not going right. I also found out very quickly I had lots of allies. There were green groups, there were residents and communities that they're not interested in cycling, but they can see how this would benefit them once they've been explained to them. I think it's really important to get local data, early data on local issues, rather than implementing a scheme because you had the budget. Doing now your largest consultation piece and finding out where the pavement parking's happening, where the speeding's happening, where the rat running's happening, so that you can create schemes that solve the problem rather than schemes that just go in and you're then on the back foot having to communicate that, and get advocates in from the start. And finally, my last goal is to remind everybody that nothing worthwhile is ever easy. I take a lot of inspiration, like looking at the past, starting with sewers, for example. Sewers should have been installed many, many years before they were, and it was really the night soil men, the people who earned money from taking people's human waste out at night, that really stopped that progress through lobbying. And also, you know, it was only when Parliament really started to literally stink that a plan was put into place. And we know that anything worthwhile is very difficult. Take the smoking ban. Wheelie bins, like the most ridiculous of things, are often very difficult to get change through. The bottom side is bus lanes in the UK, and you can see went through a small period in the 70s of installing bus lanes and taking them out again. Maybe that's where we are now, but eventually good policies have to work because they just do work, and you can't go against that. The same with congestion charge, very unpopular at consultation phase. Still unpopular now with certain types of audiences. But could you imagine London without a congestion charge? No, it's accepted as the status quo. I take a lot of inspiration from Jeanette Sadiq-Khan, her book Street Fight, which is worth reading if you haven't. And Doug Gordon told me about this. He's an advocate in New York, and he said, look, what you're going through at the moment feels horrible, but we went through it with Prospect Park West bike lane. It happens when you've got a tabloid media culture. These were the bike lane cancer. This is what was coming out of the New York Post when Jeanette Sadiq-Khan was making radical change in New York. And we have our own version here. Green Deputy Leader of Brighton Council is knocked off her bike by a van while riding along hated cycle lane that she voted for. It is just ridiculous. And we have to remember that away from this culture war that's being invented that doesn't actually exist, the middle ground, 2/3 of the population support road space reallocation, even if it means taking space away from drivers and giving it to pedestrians and cyclists. And that is worth remembering when you have difficult decisions, and that's what you will be judged on. We seem to be under a tirade of opposition from people called Nigel Farage, Nigel Havers. If you look at the articles that are coming out of the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday, you know, these are getting a handful of shares across the internet. It is really adhering to a very small group of people, and we shouldn't let that confuse us. Jeanette Sadiq-Khan also said that Michael Bloomberg, the mayor at the time, used to say this a lot: in God we trust, everyone else bring data. And it's really important, really important that we understand how we are monitoring these schemes so that we can work with policymakers to show that they work. I was very frustrated, as many were, with Kensington High Street. So the campaign that I represent, Bike is Best, did some Google artificial intelligence analysis of the bike lane and worked out that parked cars were filling up the former space of the bike lane up to 80% of the time. And when I submitted an FOI request to the council, they said that they had no criteria or metrics to be developed with which the scheme was to be assessed. That is unacceptable in 2021, and we need to push councils to set the rules of the game before we get started. And finally, just remember that people will support you. This so-called culture war is manufactured, and the data that we had for Bike is Best shows that for every one person against measures to enable cycling, 6.5 people are for it. So thank you for listening. Sorry about the slides, and I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Adam. That was I mean, the slides are brilliant. I don't know why I'm apologising for those. They were fantastic, really, you know, kind of varied, interesting slides. And I just really like your point about the language and the need for us to kind of, this is sort of a sales pitch, and things need to look nice and be pleasant. And maybe that thing of not always talking about cycling, but it's that broader picture that brings people in, that actually sells the schemes. Yeah, and I think the big takeaway from that is don't call your children Nigel as well. So yeah, thank you, Adam. I'm going to move swiftly on to Simon, because we're just to kind of keep on track with the time. So Simon, I'll hand over to you now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for joining all. And happily, my position to go last has fallen rather well for me, because I think if you listen to the journey we've just been through from the other commissioners and cycling mayor of Coventry, you'll see that there's several strands coming together there. First of all is that, you know, the Tranter one stuff was put in a hurry without very much consultation. There was a lot of backlash against it. And then also, you know, Adam touched on it and Sarah touched on it about the messaging. And so when I thought about this presentation, I thought, okay, We have a similar situation up here in the Liverpool City region as everyone else has. But for me, I sound like a stuck record. Everyone knows this, because for me, all it's about is messaging. There is a reason why huge corporations spend millions and billions of pounds on advertising and on promoting their wares. It's because they believe by doing that, they'll get into your head and change your behavior, and you will want to buy them. And I believe that's the same for our agenda. It just has to be the way. So before I talk any more about this, I'd just like to show you a little video. Now, this little video is part diary that I made throughout the kind of in-between and during lockdowns, right back, going all the way back from the start of this terrible pandemic. And it's also a series of people which I have found just reaching out to everyone who started riding since lockdown. Put that together with the monitoring that Adam just mentioned there. And here's a little video that I put together in the last couple of days. Have a look at this first. So, this is it. The first of Liverpool's pop-up cycle lanes on West Derby Road, taking out one me feel safer.
This is boss, isn't it?
So that was a premiere, actually. No one else has viewed that video except for this conference. I will now be using it in any way I can to promote the stats, you know, to promote what worked. The fact that, you know, everyone says, you know, oh, no one uses them. There's one particular example in there I'd like to focus on, and that's Chapel Street in Southport. Now, the local press just went with the lobby immediately, the anti-lobby immediately, and said, you know, this is a pointless thing. It's taken out some car parking spaces, and no one, literally what a quote was that I used in there, no one will want to ride into the town centre on their bike to do their shopping. In the last 2 months, the monitoring by Liverpool John Moores University has demonstrated there have been 29,000 journeys. That literally is just under 200 people going into town and back on that piece of pop-up lane. And so my message is to everyone personally, my ask is personally and through our organisations, every single organisation, through our councils, through our city regions, and most importantly nationally through central government, is to own the messaging, particularly as the Tranche 2 stuff starts. That we've really now got to engage immediately and be on the front foot. What I'm doing with Liverpool City Region is we're now using that little video, and what we wanted with those people, the reason we got in touch with those people is we wanted them to do far more professionally shot personal diaries. Those people just went out for me during lockdown, used their 1 hour's exercise just to show their enthusiasm for what we put in. So what I really would ask of everyone, I guess my 3 points would be, let's engage, let's do it properly, let's own the message. And that can be, like I did there, just on the hoof, just through personal messaging. But more importantly, we have to start putting proper money into the message and to the budgets of comms in these difficult times. I know a lot of those people are being pulled away for COVID messaging. So if that's the case, let's use other people, let's use other organisations, let's use other companies to put these messages together. Own the message as we go forward into Tranche 2 and pull together all the things that the different commissioners and Adam from Coventry have said there, and get those things put together professionally, like they should be, like any other organisation would be doing. They are my 3 points: messaging, messaging, and messaging.
Brilliant, Simon. Thank you so much. I was nodding away furiously throughout what you were saying there. So thank you. And I think just seeing a film clip like that, it speaks volumes, doesn't it, in such a short, sweet space of time. You know, you don't need to go into the detail of all the data and analysis of it. It tells you exactly how this can work. There's more questions coming in, so I'm going to actually start with a couple of comments here. The first one I just wanted to comment on. So there are a few people saying you weren't wearing a helmet in the video. So yeah, I suppose, I mean, my take on that is, if you
answer that immediately,
then you go for it.
Well, first of all, as we all know, of old age, it's just, you know, way going by back when, statistically proven, if you introduce cycling helmets to be legal, to be a legal requirement, it does two things. It kind of suppresses cycling, because it becomes something that you do as a specific thing to be done, and also a lot of surveys have shown, a lot of detail has shown that in actual fact it doesn't actually bring down the KSI rate amongst cyclists in particular. Anyway, it just suppresses cycling. But the most important point I would make is the most impressive slide that I have seen over the last kind of 3 years is a guy came across from Copenhagen. And they did a presentation, and one slide, they had all the shiny kids, all that kind of stuff, happy families out and about. And one slide stuck in my mind, and it still sticks in my mind today. It was a lady who was about 45 on her way to the office in a normal gear, riding across the square in Copenhagen in deep snow. She was just going to work on her bike. She didn't have helmet on. She didn't have any special Lycra stuff on, because it's not something to do. It's not a sporting thing. It's just a way of getting around.
Oh, absolutely. And if our streets are well designed to protect people, then people don't need to protect themselves with all this gear. Sarah, did you want to say something?
I have an analogy that kind of builds on the sport. We always see the Formula One drivers wearing a helmet because they're racing. And I always wear a helmet when I'm racing. But in everyday car journeys, you don't wear a helmet like you would in Formula One. So in everyday cycling journeys, the infrastructure should be safe enough to enable people to just jump on their bike.
Adam, yeah.
I don't want to give it too much credence because we'll end up being the debate about helmets, which is not what we're here for. It's the opposite of what we're here for. But I would say that during the lockdown, I cycled in my local area and I did a little count. I just had a little tally chart. 70% of the people cycling in my area were not wearing helmets. If those people aren't there, or we shame those people into somehow doing being in the wrong, then what is that as cycling advocates? We need to embrace everybody who makes that positive choice to get off the sofa or get out of their car in every single way possible. So we exclude lots of people if we even spend a minute talking about helmets. And I would encourage people to remember, as I said in my slides, people know what good looks like. Nobody looks at pictures of people in Amsterdam cycling and goes, oh yeah, that looks great, but I wish they were wearing helmets. People know what it looks like when they see it, when it's good. So we need to provide that and not make cycling seem like some sort of odd thing that weirdos do and dress up in armor for urban warfare. That's not what cycling is.
People can wear what they want. I think this is just it's a rabbit hole. I think it's not our job to tell what people could wear, whether that's the colour of your jumper or what you wear on your head. The main thing is people are cycling, and what you're wearing is neither here nor there.
It was Lucy's fault. She mentioned it.
Yeah, sorry to bring that up. I should have. Yeah, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because I mean, this debate I think people have been having for, well, as long as I've been involved in cycling, which is quite a long time. So anyway, I think we've knocked that one on the head. So I'm going to move on to some other questions. This is kind of for all of you, really, a question for all of you, but particularly potentially the mayors who are involved in how we structure cycling and the industry. So a question from Hannah Diane, how can we diversify expertise? And a very kind of related question from Carlton Lord. What help is being offered to local authorities with regard to training to facilitate these changes? So what's missing, I suppose, from the knowledge of local officers in authorities? How can we help diversify and increase their expertise? So if I start with Will first, do you want to come back on that?
In London, we're very lucky in the fact that we have across all London a large proportion of what's been delivered in London has been delivered by local authorities and by the boroughs rather than by the mayor, because the mayor only controls 5% of London's roads. For me, this is about sharing expertise and people sharing the experiences that they've had. There are some London boroughs who are very experienced to deliver things very well. So you look at the likes of Lambeth or Hackney or Waltham Forest, and because of the experience, because of the political leadership, because of the quality of the officers, and because of those campaigning communities, they've delivered an awful lot. Now, the benefits of that is that those officers are then in demand. They're either in demand for other jobs in other places so that they can share their experience, and then more people come into those boroughs and they get trained up by doing the experience and they move on, or that they can then share that experience elsewhere. There are also some brilliant consultants and other people who are out there who can help work with local authorities. So for me, I think the issue is sharing experience, talking this through. Very often it could be the technical experience can be great, but actually some of the political and some of the communications and some of the engagement challenges are not always there, because people are often trained up as excellent traffic engineers and can do some really amazingly clever things, but they aren't necessarily the skill sets that they've been trained on to sort of talk to a sort of, a sort of cross group of people who are opposing a scheme, and that can be quite intimidating. So again, talking to people who have done that on how to do it, I think is really important. So I would emphasize the need for people who are experienced to share, people who maybe have got questions or are confronted by some of these challenges, to talk to those people that they know who are out there who have got more experience and can learn from them.
Thank you. And do you think there's maybe scope for compulsory training for some officers that are lacking, where there's councils that are behind or lacking expertise?
I question whether it is always the officer's expertise that is the biggest barrier in all of this, and I actually wouldn't want to land a lot of this on the officers themselves. I think that a lot of it comes down to that political backbone and the political leadership. I think that you need communities who want to engage in it. I think there should be more training around the communications and the engagement piece. But I think, you know, training can take a long time and can be exceptionally time and resource intensive. You know, maybe it is therefore looking at getting support, whether that be through groups such as Marstrand, Living Streets, or through consultancies that do a really good job and have got experience of working in different places around the world. Now, that experience can then get in by working with those groups and getting that sort of experience embedded and in the council is an investment in the future.
Brilliant, thank you, Simon.
Yeah, I think I'd also add that you know I assure you that when you talk to the officers, any officer around the country at the moment, that Tranche 2 put them through a learning curve, gave them expertise that they have gathered in 6 months, what would have taken them 5 years. You know, the difficulties of putting things in quickly, where you hit your snags, what works, what doesn't work. You know, the platform that the Tranche 1 pop-up lanes have given us, as far as officer expertise, is absolutely incredible. I don't think they want to go through it again. But having said that, the fact that they've been through it means when they come, you certainly, as we have the discussions about putting the Tranche 2 stuff in, yes, big lesson learned, you must communicate, you must engage, but also just how the infrastructure works and how quickly you can put it in and where it doesn't work. All those experiences our officers have learned, you know, in this country, what we would have hoped that they might have learned over the next 5 years. So it's absolutely invaluable stuff.
Brilliant. Does anyone else want to, Sarah, did you want to comment? Or
we're trying to tackle some of the challenges in by setting up a design panel, so that where there are those sort of difficult schemes that need some additional support and expertise to bring them up to standard, to solve some of those narrowing challenges around railway bridges or other issues that are usually like, right, well, who's going to have priority, or can we do this route at all because of this? We can bring in some experts to enable us to make those positive decisions and have an additional viewpoint. But I think it was already mentioned in the chat, you know, everyone's a member of the public as well. So if they've been exposed to that car-centric world for so long, then they don't have that expertise. Those of us who've been fortunate enough to travel and see it working in other places can kind of look at it from a helicopter point of view and say, yeah, you could do this here. And it's having that vision. So I think it's about, you know, giving time, and if we get those opportunities to travel anytime soon, some of those study trips and taking people to show them what's possible. It doesn't always work, but it can be really powerful in showing them how it will work, and just the range of people that will then engage. You know, Simon's video showed a range of different types of people engaging and utilizing those cycle lanes, and you'll see even more, you know, when children are cycling to school in their own mini peloton in Holland. It's just, you know, joyful.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of funny, isn't it? Because some of these images of lots of people cycling, and as you say, lots of children cycling, that's something that we are seeing in pockets around the country now, and it's so uplifting. There were a number of questions actually about this High Court ruling on temporary measures and the judicial review. So a question from Denise Hussein, in light of the High Court ruling, that TfL flouted its kind of equality duties, will there be a kind of a change in direction, I suppose?
I should probably field that one.
Yeah.
So as many of you will know, there was a court case involving two groups from the taxi trade who were opposing one of the schemes that we put in Bishopsgate. There was very much focus on taxi access to bus lanes and bus gates, actually, rather than bus lanes in one particular location in London. Disappointingly, we lost that case on a number of different grounds, many of which we don't agree with in terms of that, and which is why we're appealing. So I can't really talk too much about the specific piece because of the legal process that's going on. However, there are a couple of things that are very clear in this. One is that the schemes that are in at the moment will remain in until we've gone through that appeal process. So people shouldn't worry about things being removed prematurely because of that. But I think there's a wider piece here of the challenge of doing things in this rapid speed that we have seen. I think Simon hit the nail on the head when we're talking about stuff that's taken 5 years being delivered in 6 months. And one of the overarching sort of framework that came out of government on this was a guidance on reducing, or actually not having any consultation as part of that, which allowed a lot of rapid rollout. But I think, you know, during that, we all recognized, and having spent sort of 4 years delivering stuff with all the engagement and consultation, that is a critical part of this. So moving forward, clearly there needs to be continued engagement with everybody in this area. And one of the areas where I disagree with the judge is that we take our equalities impact assessments really very strong, very seriously, and I think it is done well. But I think, you know, when you're delivering things at massive pace and massive speed, there are challenges in that. So you know, there's also, as I said, throughout this whole period, there's a huge amount that we've learned on what works and what doesn't work, what could be done better, and what doing. And I think the important thing moving forward is how do we embed those working practices into what is going to be the new normal. The rapid rollout of street space is not going to be the new normal because the government guidance has changed in terms of engagement, and I think that is for the better, and that will be important moving forward. But as I said when I was talking in my presentation, what this does show is that we can move far faster than we have in the past. We can deliver an awful lot with less money, but we do need to bring people along with us, and we do need to engage all our communities in making sure that the schemes are as good as they possibly can be.
Brilliant, thank you. Did anyone else want to comment on that? Or I'll move on to the next question then. So, I mean, this is very much linked to that sort of issue, really, but has the rapid rollout of Tranche 1 turned people against cycling? Adam, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. No, we're giving the people what they want. As I say, we have to remember that the lion's share of the audience are super supportive of this. Again, what Jeanette Khan would say is if this was an election, it would be a landslide in the terms of the support that active travel has from every single nationally representative opinion poll. Where I think it differs, and this is what Will was saying, is you have to engage with the community, and I think you have to bring them on a journey with you. And on one hand, you know, it was an emergency. It is an emergency. I think we've not communicated well that this is a respiratory pandemic, and air quality has an issue with that. So we've not communicated that well. But I think there's a general, there's a general need to do stuff quickly. But going forward, as I said in my presentation, I think it's about bringing the community on a journey, showing them what good looks like, and actually, when you are implementing schemes, just having little things that show that it's not just for cyclists. Because when people think cyclists, they assume that it's for people who already cycle, and they don't know what they don't know. So we need to show them, you know, it might be a cycle lane and some cycle parking with a parklet, you know, so people can go, hey, that's cool. Like, now there's less cars and I can sit down and have a coffee with my friend during lockdown or whatever. Not during lockdown, don't do that. But you know, they have, we need to show that it's for more than people than just cyclists. But we ask the general public, they want to ride their bikes, and most people don't want to be involved in the culture war. They just want to be able to cycle with their kids to school or go to the park or whatever.
Yeah, I would add to that. You know, I think, you know, as well as officers, the highways officers just physically putting the stuff in, I think what I think the other steep learning curve was what the comms teams went through, because, you know, this stuff went in very quickly, and immediately the small minority who are very well organised got out negative messages, and once a negative message is out there, you then start on the back foot of how to positive message that. But there's, you know, but I don't think anyone just foresaw how quickly this stuff was going to happen, and so the whole thing's very reactive. And in Tranche 2, as I said, you know, in my presentation, what we've got to be is more proactive, get in charge of the messaging and get in charge of the engagement. And then once those figures are there, you know, the amazing stats that I had at a hand was just because someone cleverly over at LJMU working with the LCR decided to put in some monitors as the pop-up lanes arrived. And that meant, you know, one debate, the first pop-up lane that went in West Derby Road, you know, we had a couple of belligerent councillors up there just politicking and saying, you know, this is terrible, this is causing congestion, and no one uses it. And in actual fact, the statistics, when the statistics were presented to these councillors, they literally said they're not true. And so then we went back again as well, actually, I'm sorry, they are. And so then they went quiet. Because after all, people are using them. Most importantly, the clever trick was using the bus monitors to show the journey times hadn't changed. So this is using stats with positive messaging. And that's what we've learned through tranche 1, ready for tranche 2.
Brilliant. Yeah, so we need that accurate data, don't we, to kind of make the case for it behind campaigns which people understand and are kind of accessible.
It's essential. During one conversation I had with Will, you know, I haven't really thought about this, is that in actual fact, is you think no one's using that cycle lane because it moves people very efficiently. Very rarely do you see traffic congestion in a cycle lane because it swings things along very efficiently indeed. And literally, even the officers up in Sefton Council have been really pro the temporary measures. We're absolutely staggered at the figures who have been using their cycle lanes, and that gives them that gives them the power, and it also gives them the political will to continue forward, but only because we have the monitoring.
Yeah, brilliant. No, I mean, it's that kind of space efficiency thing, isn't it? Because the car is just the most inefficient form of transport we've yet created. So, Will, did you want to step in?
Yeah, Lucy, I just wanted to comment on the impact of time in this. Like, change can be very, very scary, particularly at a stressful time at the moment. You know, our lives are stressful at the moment. You couldn't think of anything more stressful than a global pandemic, and change for a lot of people is very difficult, and I can completely understand that. But it's very interesting looking at some of the polling and looking at the survey results over time, and actually sort of people actually dealing with the cognitive dissonance, which is a very hard thing for any of us to deal with, actually saying, I was wrong, I like this now. And it's interesting when you're starting to ask people, would you want us to take this out? Yeah. And actually what we're finding is people writing, say, actually, they've got this in their area, why can't we have it in ours? Yeah. And so part of the tranche 2, so there were 2 phases of funding from DFT, aside from the London government stuff, but there was the stuff that came in at the beginning and then the second phase. Since that went out, we've had to change, a lot of the councils have changed their plans because people have been asking for things in areas where they haven't got it, and they don't think it's fair that it's happening there rather than here. So I think there is a point around telling the story, showing this. You need the data. Like, without a shadow of a doubt, you need all that data, and Simon's completely right about the monitoring. But data alone doesn't change people's minds. You know, I wish it did, because I've got data coming out of my ears. Yeah, but actually, it's data plus stories. Yeah, that make it. So that's why Simon's video was so nice. Actually, just hearing from normal people talking about this, but without the data underneath all that, then it won't count for anything. So you need a combination of both.
Brilliant. Yeah. So no, thank you. We've got about 7 more minutes. So Sarah, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say it's also important that we talk to the people rather than utilise them as an excuse for doing something that we think we ought to see. And I think it's just been put in the chat, sort of stolen the words out of my mouth almost, that we utilise the elderly people and disabled people as a reason for not doing something. But actually those people are potentially the people who would like to see more of this kind of thing in order to enable them to get out more independently. Vehicles parked on pavements, blockages so they can't get through with a wheelchair or having access problems mean that they're basically unable to go where they'd like to go without help. So it's not always an assumption that they will be collected by a vehicle. If they'd like to visit their local green space, they might want to be able to do that by themselves. And so it's about asking the right people and asking the people themselves rather than this constant does he take sugar type of scenario.
Yeah, no, really, that's a really good point. And kind of on this, I'm going to take the chair's prerogative and just ask a question myself. There is this issue of kind of low traffic neighbourhood postcode lottery. You know, the people who are maybe more motivated, you know, arguably, I don't know, there's kind of, I don't think there's any evidence for this, but there have been complaints that, you know, gentrifies areas. People pay to live in a lightly trafficked road. They don't pay to live on the A3. What are the kind of equality implications? How do we address those arguments? And also, how do we address this issue of you know, low traffic neighbourhoods being a postcode lottery, and that has implications for health and everything else being a postcode lottery. Will, yeah.
So this is something that's come up very loudly in London, and one, it comes back to the point around data, that actually that's not true, and actually in terms of social deprivation indicators, a lot of, that there is a huge amount of areas which are disadvantaged, which are covered by the LTNs, but also that's not entirely by accident. What some of the criteria, there is limited funding, and so we do have to prioritize, and we work with local authorities to prioritize. One of the criteria in that prioritization is around is around inequalities, health inequalities, economic inequalities, so that the most disadvantaged areas, and we've seen, if there's one thing that COVID has highlighted, are the inequalities within society in the UK, whether that is health or whether that is economic or mental health or what have you. And so I think we need to be proactive, not just sort of we need to proactively be working so that the criteria do actually engage in more disadvantaged areas, so that those places and those people that require the benefits, whether that be air quality, physical activity, mental health benefits, where they need them the most, they actually get the most benefit. They're more likely to get that process.
Yeah, thanks, Will. So I just kind of on this, so it's not, there's the question of, I suppose, I mean, in a way, everyone wants to live in a low traffic neighbourhood. That's the thing. And in a way, we need a national plan potentially for low traffic neighbourhoods. And kind of on that note, there was another question from somebody asking, from Susie Ackers-Smith asking, is it possible to have a Shires mayor? So there's maybe a lot of focus in cities and in urban areas on walking and cycling, but what about more rural locations? Sarah, I know you wanted to speak maybe on that last point, but.
Oh, well, no. Well, Susie represents cycling and walking where I live. I'm in Cheshire East, in a very tiny corner of Susie's, area. And I think it is a challenge in places like this, because you've got some urban centres around some small towns, and then you've got outlying villages that are maybe commuter villages where people have got access to a station and then commute into cities. So for here where I am, commuting into Manchester. But there is still a need to enable people to walk and cycle in their local area and safely to do that. And the issues of parked vehicles, we had temporary measures where they took away those spaces to enable social distancing, and they were quickly put back as vehicle spaces again, which wasn't popular with the people who were trying to queue outside the pharmacy or outside the bakery and that kind of thing. So I think there's an opportunity maybe for coordinating, because we all feel like our centre is the most important centre, and collectively having a group of people who work together to try and raise the opportunities. Because as Susie pointed out in a later comment, the amount of money that comes to a place like Cheshire East is very, very minimal. Yet there are many, many different centres, little tiny centres that still need attention. And so until we get that steady stream of pipeline of funding, it will become really difficult to decide. So yeah, there's certainly a model of people that will, a network of people that would be needed to support a county and a pair of counties like we have here.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Adam, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I live just a couple of miles outside the Coventry border in Warwickshire, which is again a Shire county. The things that, obviously not every Shire county is the same, but the things I would say is that it's, a lot of Shire counties do not have an LC WIPs. They have not, they've been given lots of time, some of them have been given funding to do it, but they're not quite there yet with their local cycling walking infrastructure plans. I would, as a number one priority, be pushing them on that, because what happened when Tranche 1 came in, what happened when Tranche 2 comes in, is that they got like those schemes. So those schemes ready, which is what an LC WIPs does, will allow them to gradually, as funding comes in, and funding, local authorities are going to get, guaranteed amounts of funding, hopefully over the long term. So it won't be a lottery each year. So they'll be able to plan. So I would focus on, on that, and also bearing in mind that it's very easy to drive in some of these areas. Actually, driving is not a problem. If I drove everywhere where I live, I would almost never be in congestion, because driving is just so damn easy. So you have to look at the ways that inspire people. It could be like going to the shops with a cargo bike, or it could be a parklet. So those things start first. Sorry, outside.
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm just conscious it's 11:14 and we may well get kicked out at bang on 11:15. So I didn't want to just to kind of give people a bit of warning about that. But no, that's a really good point, Adam. I think it's 11:15 and we haven't been kicked out yet, so I'm not quite sure how this finishes, but I don't know if each of you wanted to just make one kind of final point, the most important point you think for the future of cycling in this country. I'll start with you, Will, and then just go round. Did you? Yeah.
I think the thing that gives me the most inspiration is that Adam putting up the sign that Sarah Berry had designed on streets of London. The roads are open, yeah. And we have seen during this crisis so many new people, not the usual suspects in terms of community campaigners, but people who have seen what their area could be like and are now talking to councillors, talking to the mayors, writing to people like me, asking for more. And for me, that will be the game changer out of all of this, is that the more people who ask for this, who talk about it, it's part of the conversation around the playground, it's part of the conversation in our local shops, normal people talking about this and saying why they like it, yeah, that is going to fuel the change that the UK needs forever. Yeah, funding streams can fade, political need can fade, but that won't fade. And for me, that's what's been most inspiring and gives me the greatest cause for hope moving forward.
Thank you, Will. Simon?
Yeah, I would just, you know what I'm going to say, let's use this hopefully, please everyone, this final lockdown to get on the front foot. When we are all kind of released back into normality and all feeling joyous and spring is upon us and hopefully we have some good weather, let's be ready with the messaging. Let's please, from a personal level, gather the data now, gather the messages now, and be ready at all levels, particularly through our comms teams, to get those messages ready to push out, to keep people, support them in the good behaviour that's happened during the pandemic. And now Tranche 2 is going in. Get ready to support that and engage properly.
Brilliant. So perhaps the four of you and Chris Boardman need to get together and produce a video of the way forward for the UK. Yeah,
we've been trying for a while. The lockdowns keep stopping us.
Adam, did you want to have a point?
Yeah, just building on communications, I think everyone's doing really good work on a local level. We can make improvements. The single biggest thing bringing this together is going to be the narrative. We need to make it clear who these schemes are for and who benefits. And it strikes me, I know we've got Active Travel England on the horizon, and hopefully that will change things, but it strikes me that Sport England, for example, has This Girl Can, and the Department for Transport has the Think campaign, which is basically don't run anyone over, please. So we need to make sure that we inspire and promote and show the diversity of who this is for, and educate through a public information awareness campaign, as well as all the great work that's being done on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sarah, I'm going to give you the last word on this.
Well, Will stole what I normally say at the end of most of the meetings when I engage with our communities, is that if you see something you like, say that you like it, because you can be very, very sure that the people who don't like it will be finding people from all over the world to fill in their, their forms to say, and their, what do you call it? Surveys to say that they don't like it either, even though they don't live anywhere near. So if you see something you like, make sure you say so.